pleased to announce our guest speaker. And you all know her very well. She's here every Sunday playing the keyboard. Debbie Priest presents Baby with the Bathwater.
Hey everybody. Jim, right? Is that your name?
Yep.
Okay. Nice to see you, Jim. Nice to see you, Sylvie. Marilyn. Yeah, I was going to talk about the baby with the bathwater, but I heard that somebody already gave that sermon a month ago. So I guess I don't need to talk. Mine will be probably a little bit different than what Dean shared a month ago. And by the way, I just want to thank all of you for your prayers for my kids who were in the accident the afternoon before, because they're recovering very, very well. So thank you for their prayers. So what inspired this talk was reading a couple books recently. One, I wish I had the copy with me, but I loaned it to a friend. It was a book about Amy McPherson. Has anybody ever heard of her? Oh, okay. I had never heard of her, but her story was very, very interesting. When she was born, I can't remember exactly, but her mother really offered her up to God, and felt that this child was going to be something very special. And as it turned out, when she grew up, she became an evangelist. And this was back like in 1920. And how often do you hear about female preachers at that time? But she just felt so led by the Spirit. And she just went out and just traveled. And she had first she had one child, then she had two children. The father of the first passed away, and then the second one was actually there. But she would travel in this old car, and with her mother and her one or two kids, with no money, just completely relying on the Lord. And she would just go to these revivals. I guess they had a lot of tent revivals at that time, and she would just travel around, and then they, take up donations, and this is how she supported herself. And she was amazingly successful. She actually created the first mega church in America. In Los Angeles, she created a church of 3,500, and it's a huge, huge building. And she was just extremely successful. And she was actually able to do healings as well. And there was a room devoted, it was just for people who had been healed, and then they'd leave their canes, their walkers, their wheelchairs, whatever. They would just leave it and walk out healed. And so she was just led by the Spirit, and that just inspired me so much. And then another book that I read, I had it at my house, but I completely forgot about it. I read it years ago. And I had sorted through all my books recently, a couple months ago, and I came across this. It's The Prayer Life, written by Andrew Murray. And by the way, you can find this and other books on Amazon Kindle for 99 cents. But I like the hard copies that you could pick up, and mine is actually coming apart and all lined up. But this also was written a long, long time ago. In the very first page, he talks about he had attended a conference in 1912, and he actually died in 1917. So this was a long time ago too, and he wrote this, and he was speaking to ministers about the neglect of prayer, that it's not a priority, and because of that, the churches are struggling. And it just really moved me in such a deep way, and it's really helped me renew my prayer life. And he talks about really spending time, and he says, how many spend a half an hour in prayer? And like nobody raised their hand. How many spend 20 minutes? How many spend 15 minutes? How many spend 5 minutes? And maybe some people finally raise their hand. But anyway, so it really inspired me to work on my prayer life, and I'm making that a regular practice of my life now, every morning, as much as possible. And both these books inspired me so much because it brought back memories of when I was in my early 20s. I joined the Unification Church. I think most of you know that. Some of you don't, of Reverend Moon. And I was married and blessed in that church, and I was matched by Reverend Moon, and I happily married for 43 years now to my wonderful husband. But at the time, this was like in 1974, and our church didn't have anything then. Sorry. So we were sent out on these fundraising teams, and we would work all day and sometimes at night as well. And I know when everybody thinks about Reverend Moon, they just think, oh, he's just after their money, and and he's just brainwashing these kids, these 20-year-olds. But really, it was a training for us to learn to totally rely on God. And also, we learned many important things, and he was always teaching us all the time. And he talked about the importance of setting our goals and persevering, because many times the blessing comes right at the last minute. When you're ready to give up, that blessing comes. And I saw that many times. I remember sometimes going to some bars, and I hadn't made, maybe my goal is $100, and I had made $25 the whole day. And then right at the very end, the very last bar, I'd walk into this bar, I was selling flowers or something, and some guy would say, oh, little lady, what you got there? And take my bucket, and he said, I'll take all those. And he goes around, and he buys all the flowers and gives them to all the women there, and I make my goal. And miracles like this would happen all the time. I came to depend on it. But also, what happened was that sometimes I have spiritual experiences as well. And what would happen was, because when I would fundraise, and this is something that Reverend Moon taught us too, he said, when you sell your product, think about it as just like if you have like peanuts. Think about when you sell these peanuts and they eat these peanuts, it'll just be like a love bomb in their heart, and they'll feel that. So just feel like you're blessing people. And And so it's like I would have the goal in the back of my mind, but I wasn't just focused on, okay, I gotta make my goal, or I'm gonna get in trouble if I don't make my goal. But instead, it was like, okay, I'm just gonna love people all day long. And I would always make my goal, but it was so much more fun than just, you know, focusing on trying to make money. And sometimes I would just become open spiritually. And what I mean by that is because like this love was like coming through me all day long. And you know, he would always talk about this, Reverend Moon too. You have to make yourself empty. You have to become a complete mindedness by giving so that the love comes through you and out of you. And so sometimes in the evening, it's like I would get this second wind, and I would have, it would be at night, and I'd be at a strip of bars, and it was just like it was like somebody had turned on the lights, and everything was light and warm, and I felt completely safe no matter where I went. And then also, this was very interesting. In our church, we teach that we have, as well as our physical bodies, we have our spiritual bodies, and that's what we have when we pass on. And in some of the bars that were kind of like not the highest spirit, kind of low spirit, I'd walk in there and I would actually see the spirit bodies of people. And it was like very cartoonish, ugly actually. But I felt, again, I just felt completely safe. So anyway, reading these books reminded me of those experiences. And so during that time, I really grew in my faith by seeing these miracles and in loving people and being exposed to so many different kinds of people. But I also experienced God's power, this amazing power when you really learn to give and give and give. And also during this time I learned to really pray really deeply. And I remember having these breakthroughs in my prayer where I would just cry and cry and cry, and I was able to I remember I was able to feel how much God loved me and God's compassion for me, because as a child I had been abused and been in difficult circumstances, but I just felt God's compassion for me and just wanting to embrace me. But she couldn't, because God uses us, uses our arms, and there weren't the arms to embrace me. And at the same time, I felt this deep, deep forgiveness for those people who had hurt me or neglected me. So back to the title, The Baby in the Bathwater. The reason when I was reading these books, I was thinking, man, there's just like so much depth to Christianity. Oh yeah, and that was another thing. It's like I finally understood why we needed Jesus, because we needed an example of true love. We needed an example of complete unconditional love. So there's just so much depth to Christianity, and those who have really lived, a deep Christian life, like the saints, Saint Francis, others, they've had many of these experiences and felt God's tear and felt miracles happening in their lives. But what has happened is that so many people have turned away from Christianity. But I feel like they've thrown out the baby with the bathwater, missing these really important elements. And there's good reason for it. So many things don't make sense. you know, being based on fear. You're going to go to hell if you don't do this or do that, or believe in Jesus, or things that just don't make sense, virgin birth and these miracles and things. So many people have just turned away from Christianity. So, and there's very, very good, like I said, there's very good reasons for that. So I was thinking to myself, what Christianity really needs is an upgrade. You know how when our computers or our phones aren't working because it has these bugs in it, we get an upgrade. And it's just like, because when we have these bugs, it's so frustrating. You have to kind of work your way around it, and you have to turn your phone off, or you just have to ignore it and just try to do your best. Well, it's the same thing with Christianity. Even though there's a lot of good things, there's so many things that don't make sense that you either have to twist your mind to get around those ideas, or just say, forget it. It's like just throwing out your computer, where it's a bug in the programming or in a software. It's not the computer. You don't have to throw your computer out. You don't have to throw your phone out. So Christianity needs an upgrade. It is time for an upgrade for Christianity so that it makes sense to people. And, just as in so many other areas, there have been upgrades in medicine. God has worked in amazing ways to elevate our understanding of the human body. And there's been so many develops in science and technology. So isn't it possible that there could be an upgrade of Christianity? I mean, it's been around here for 2,000 years. Isn't it possible that there could be something new? Well, I'm here to tell you that there is. And it's actually been around for decades. But unfortunately, it's been hidden because of misunderstandings, because of negative rumors, because of skepticism. And I get that. I imagine so many of you, especially as younger people, were searching for the truth, and then because you couldn't find it, then you just give up. So our thinking is, well, there's nothing new under the sun. There's nothing new, but there is. For those who have ears to hear it, there is something new under the sun that is very profound. And I just want to end this with these two verses from the Bible. Well, actually, I want to say one other thing, and that is that, whenever there is something new, there's going to be a lot of misunderstanding. There's going to be a lot of persecution. Think of what happened to people like Copernicus or other people who brought something new, a new paradigm of a different way of looking at things. There's always persecution. There's always upset because they're changing people's paradigms, and people don't want to change. They're comfortable. But I want to challenge you to think that actually when there's controversy, there's a good chance that there's actually something there. If nothing's happening, and then, oh yeah, this feels real comfortable, it's not challenging at all, then it's probably nothing new. But if there's a lot of controversy, there's a good chance that there's something there. So I want to just end this with two Bible verses. One is St. Paul said in Corinthians 13:12, "For now we see through a glass darkly, than face to face. And he's talking about the future now. Jesus said in John 16:13, when the Spirit of truth comes, he will guide you into all the truth. You know, Jesus didn't say it's just the Bible, you don't need anything else. He said the Spirit of truth is coming. And I'm telling you, the truth has arrived. Thank you.